Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a very thought-provoking book, Democracy, the God That Failed, by Hans Hermann Hoppe. Is democracy really the best system, or is it a flawed God leading society astray? Let's break down Hoppe's big ideas, time preference, monarchy versus democracy, and his idea for a private, libertarian, rights-based society. Go get a slurp drink and let's dive into it. Now, who is Hans Hermann Hoppe? Hoppe is an Austrian school economist and anarcho-capitalist. He argues that democracy drives societal decline, based on innate corruption, dissolution of fundamental property rights, and the very ideas of civilizational breakdown. How? One way is through the lens of time preference. In his first essay on time preference, government, and the process of decivilization, Hoppe introduces time preference. Now, what is time preference? This is how much people prioritize the present over the future. Time preference means chasing quick wins, like votes or re-election, while low time preference means planning for the long haul, like saving for future generations or retirement. Hoppe says that democracy fuels time preference, high time preference. Elected officials act as looters and vultures, grabbing short-term gains. Think bloated welfare programs, skyrocketing debt, and overregulation. Why? They're not the owners of the government, right? They're temporary tenants, so they don't care about long-term consequences. This, Hoppe argues, erodes stability, increases crime, and weakens cultural standards. It's what he calls decivilization. Now, contrast that with monarchy. A king, as a private owner of the realm, has a stake in its future, like a father passing down his property to his sons. This incentivizes long-term thinking, like building infrastructure or keeping taxes low to preserve wealth. Democracy, by contrast, is a free-for-all, Fortnite battle royale, where elected officials are actually incentivized to loot by the system. Contrast that with monarchy, right? Really think about that. So, in his next chapter on monarchy, democracy, and the idea of natural order, Hoppe digs deeper. Now, as a libertarian who hates centralized power, you think he'd be against monarchy, right? Wrong. Hoppe's monarchy isn't the quite incorrect liberal notion of some tyrant ruling with an iron fist. It's closer to Aristotle's constitutional aristocracy. The monarch is the protector of the people's rights. See here, given the Magna Carta and what it represents as that system they had. Especially their property rights. Those are very important to Hoppe in the Austrian economic standard, which we'll get into a bit later, a bit deeper. In Hoppe's constitutional monarchy, laws do not change with a simple majority. A simple 51% waving their hand and blowing away all rights and protections the average citizen has because of changing demographics, a sway in public opinion, or current events that don't really peter out in the long term. Herd mentality, as they say. These are immutable. They are set in stone to give all citizens a sense of security. In this way, the monarch is the guardian of the constitutional document, like the Magna Carta or the Constitution of Year 3, or the Declarations of Confederation, even the Constitution of the United States in its original, unaltered, unamended form could be considered a document such as this. This approach embodies a low time preference civilization. Because the kingdom is their own private property, monarchs are incentivized to improve it, like a homeowner fixing up their house for their kids. Democracy, on the other hand, is like being a squatter. You might just trash it because it's not yours long term. Hoppe says this makes democracy fundamentally unnatural, prioritizing short-term looting over responsibility. Hoppe also includes a very simple yet powerful argument. Who is more fit to do a job? Someone who has been genetically selected and trained their entire life to do it, or someone who has won a popularity contest. Now, Hoppe's natural order is straight out of an anarcho-capitalist dream. Libertarians often get the semi-farcical retort of, who will build the roads? And as much as they hate it, it is kind of a valid point, right? All kinds of classes and people are needed for a functional nation state, not just intelligent libertarians who understand collective long-term cooperation. But Hoppe's idea of natural order has more teeth to it. A nation state built on property rights, freedom of association, and security under a long-term executive would bring together the elements necessary for such a responsibility-based society. Hoppe admits this might sound like naive libertarian idealism, and I think that's true to a degree. But he argues it's the only system that aligns with human nature, freedom and property, not government overreach. Like that. They grab you. In his essay on centralization and secession, he suggests breaking up big states into tiny, decentralized units to help get there. This process is often referred to as balkanization, as it refers to the breakup of the Balkan states. It's not the right slide. We'll get there in a minute. In Democracy, Redistribution, and Destruction of Property, Hoppe gets deeper into a libertarian favorite, the seizing of private property by way of the state monopoly on violence. He says democracy's obsession with redistribution, taxes, welfare, you name it, undermines property rights. As you see here, private club, members and guests only. That's the foundation of free association. He also critiques the way free association works in democracies, arguing it conflicts with property rights directly. If you can't control who uses your property, then you don't really own it. The state just allows you to use it under their own terms. Free association is often considered a cornerstone of a free democracy, with extra liberty on the side. But if the government will force you, at the point of a gun, to associate with those who don't wish to, and also use organized violence against you and your property, if you wish to use it as you please, then those very ideas that democracy claims to embody ring quite hollow in Hoppe's opinion. Now, the universal franchise. Hoppe's not a big fan of the universal franchise, or one man, one vote. In his view, voting should be tied to merit, like property ownership or achievement of some other kind, not just being an adult. He leans on solid data. He cites 100 years of U.S. Army IQ distribution, and also those distribution charts in the bell curve, a book he references a lot by Charles Murray, to argue that not everyone's equally equipped to make informed decisions. Hoppe speaks about the founder's model for the franchise in America, which was limited to those adults who owned property and were in good social standing. He calls this group the natural elites of a civilization, and argues that only those with both a sufficient capability and sufficient proven responsibility should be able to cast a vote in the governance of their nation. He compares modern democracy to the Soviet Union's new man ethos, where everyone is treated as an interchangeable, a blank slate who can do anything if given enough state support. Hoppe's specific example, in how both communists and some liberal thinkers embody the idea, is that every man is a blank slate. Every man has identical talents, capabilities, drive, and resourcefulness. If this was Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then every person would have a 10 ability score across the board. This policy proved quite disastrous for the Soviet Union, and even they had to scale it back to focus on the practical after the janitors they promoted to become brain surgeons were not up to the task. Even with all the training and education and the eternal science of Marxism they could want. While this is a scathing review of democratic ideology, it strikes me as quite proficient in many regards, especially concerning American social policies in the 21st century, which Hoppe cites a lot of individual programs, especially some of the more notorious money sinks in the social sciences. Hoppe's point is that universal voting fuels short-term policies, as politicians will pander to the masses. He'd rather see so-called natural elites, people who've earned influence, guide society. It's a stance that's worked historically, but sparked much debate in modern times and interpretations of America's founding ideology. So what is Hoppe's fix, right? What does he recommend? Beyond secession and breakup, he pushes for a privately owned government, not a state, so to say, but a system where property and contracts rule. Other essays in the book tackle immigration. He's for tight control based on property rights, free trade. He's in favor of it, but with a lot of protectionist measures to keep things level with foreign nations. And even a private defense system. It's all about replacing, in his words, public looting with private responsibility. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't touch briefly on Austrian economics near the end here. Austrian economics are a school of thought that's all about individual choice, free markets, and why government meddling often backfires. From Mises to Hayek, this is the economics of liberty. So let's dive into that, shall we? Austrian economics were born in 19th century Vienna. They are a framework that puts human actions at the center of how economics work. It's not about complex math or government forecasts. It's about understanding, fundamentally, how people make choices in a world of scarcity. Ready to see what makes it all tick? So, Austrian economics rests on a few core ideas. First is human action. People act purposefully to achieve their goals, whether it's buying a coffee or starting a business. This drives everything in the economy. Now, a first tenet of this is that people are rational actors. This means that people will always act in their own best interest. Now, of course, there are irrational actors, people acting on emotion, religious fervor, what have you, really. But these people are not the majority and they're not the main actors in the economy. So, in a vacuum, let's assume everyone is a rational actor. Next, subjective value. Value, in the Austrian idea, isn't set by some formula, right? Value is based on what individuals think something is worth. A diamond might be priceless to one person, worthless to another. Markets reflect these personal preferences. Ergo, there is no objective value based on material worth or number of labor hours. Take the communist perception of value, right? An item's value is directly responsible for how many hours of labor was made to produce it. It also matters how close you are to a factory. And this is something that Hoppe critiques in many of his essays. Then there's spontaneous order Austrians, like Friedrich Hayek, who argue that complex systems, like economies, emerge naturally from individual actions, not top-down plans. Think of a busy market. No one's directing it, but it works because people are trading and interacting freely. Finally, time preference. People value the present over the future, and we spoke about time preference a bit earlier. Some value it more than others, right? Low time preference means saving and investing for tomorrow, which Austrians, sorry, I have a bit of a nosebleed today. It's my allergies really messing with me. Time preference. You either have a low time preference or a high time preference, or most people do, somewhere in between. High time preference means you really focus on the now. Buying scratch-off lottery tickets, taking out high-interest loans, just trying to get by day to day. And one isn't necessarily superior to the other. You definitely need both of them to get along. But in an economic nation-building standpoint, you really want to have low time preference to be able to build for the future and make your civilization stand the test of time, Ozymandias style. Which is like think of it. A great poem by Shelby, I think. Or was it Lord Byron? Shelby? Anyway. I am Ozymandias, king of kings. I'm Ozymandias, king of kings. All who are mighty to spare. What's more, all that I had isn't there. So it's basically like my mic. This is such a disaster of a video, so if you're still watching, thank you. I really messed this part up. Basically, the Ozymandias poem is like, it's about the test of time and empires, where there's a big statue and it's like half buried in the sand, and he's like, despite all that I had, how great I was, all the things that I built, uh, there's nothing left just because this test of time and that time preference. So all of you now living who think you're so mighty and so grandiose, time will still get you in the end if you don't plan and have a low time preference and endure. That's what it's about, basically. I really kind of butchered it there, but that's what Hoppe is saying here, basically, about the Austrian approach. Free markets. Austrians really love free markets, but why? It's because prices, they're set by supply and demand, act like market signals. They tell producers what to make and consumers what to buy, what they want to buy. Steve Jobs would probably disagree with that, but for the most part, it's true, right? Ludwig von Mises, who is kind of Hoppe's mentor in this whole sphere, called this the market process, a dynamic system where entrepreneurs innovate to meet needs. But here's the kicker. Government intervention really messes this up. Price controls, subsidies, or regulations distort those signals, leading to shortages, surpluses, or wasted resources. Austrians say, let the market do its thing. It's the best way to allocate those resources efficiently. Because when people want things, when producers make things, those resources get where they're going. And if the government puts down price controls or regulation, that will lead to volatility, and it will take time for the market to reset into an efficient manner. Take rent control, probably one of the most famous of these examples. It sounds nice, right? Cheap housing for everybody, which we all want. But the Austrians argue it discourages landlords from building or maintaining homes, leading to housing shortages. The market signals are getting scrambled. Once again, that's an example of low time preference. If the landlords, right, which is kind of a loaded term these days, but if the owners of the housing have low rent, they're not making a lot of money, they can't build more housing, which means there's a housing scarcity. And so those rent prices will go up way more than they did if there was more housing being developed and maintained. Austrians have a unique take on money and economic cycles as well. They're big fans of sound money. What does that mean? Non-fiat, like gold or silver, because it's stable and less easily manipulated. Gold is often cited as a hedge against inflation, and that's kind of true. It's kind of not true just by the way it acts rather than what it actually is. But central banks, like the Federal Reserve, print money, right? I'm sure you've all seen the meme of Jay Powell doing the money printer go, right? That's a no-go for them. It creates artificial booms that lead to busts. And we've seen this during COVID. We've seen this during when Nixon took America off the gold standard. Fiat has its advantages, but when you have a fiat-based economy, it's really just monopoly money at that point. The national debt doesn't matter. You can keep going up and up and up. So people quibbling in Congress about budget issues, omnibus spending, big bills, raising the national debt, it doesn't mean as much because it's all based on a systematic interpretation of fractional share banking, not tangible assets backed by more than good faith, backed by material value, which is what the Austrians really are all about. So, is democracy a failed god? Does monarchy or a stateless society hold the answers? Hoppe's ideas are bold, interesting, but based on a traditional government's ideas that have lasted for 1,000 years. You really think about that. Monarchy lasted for over 1,000 years. Democracy has not been around for more than 300 years. The America was often called the American experiment. And yes, there was Venice and the Dutch before America, but those were a lot different in a way. It was not a universal franchise, one man, one vote, directly electing your officials and your executive. It was a lot more Republican. I've spoken a bit about Venice in the past. I might do a video on the Venetian government later because it's very interesting. But what do you think, right? Does democracy doom us to short-term chaos, or is there another way, a third position? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you like this video, like it. If you hated the video, say that too. I know this one was kind of a scramble at the end there. I've been kind of my allergies. I'm blaming the allergies for it. But yeah, if you liked it, there's more to come. So thanks for watching. Thanks for so much. I know I make kind of niche videos about civics and kind of governmental politics and stuff like that, but I love making these. It's a stuff that interests me. And if you like it, give me a follow and you'll see more. All right? Well, see you guys next time.